Hello everyone, today's video is an early guide to the 2022 gubernatorial elections. Let's start by looking at a map of who the incumbents are and what their intentions are going into the election. Virginia and New Jersey are shaded as toss-up because it's unclear what party their incumbents will be, but they won't have elections in 2022 anyway. California is shaded as a toss-up because it's unclear what party their incumbent will be going into the election. But unlike Virginia and New Jersey, they do have an election in 2022. Incumbent Republican governors not running for re-election are Doug Ducey of Arizona, Larry Hogan of Maryland, Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas, and Pete Ricketts of Nebraska. Incumbent Democratic governors not running for re-election are Kate Brown of Oregon, Tom Wolf of Pennsylvania, and David Ige of Hawaii. First, I'll fill in the safe elections. I'm not going to be talking about these states right now because they are very unlikely to be competitive in 2022. These are the likely states. These are highly expected to go to their respective party, but they could flip under specific circumstances. They are also expected to be closer than the safe states. In Colorado, Democratic Governor Jared Polis is seeking a second term. Polis won the governorship in 2018 by a 10.6% margin of victory. Polis is expected to win by a similar margin, regardless of who the Republican candidate is. The next likely state is Minnesota. Democratic farmer-labor governor Tim Walz will probably seek a second term. He was elected in 2018 by a margin of 11.4%. Even if he does not run for re-election, Minnesota is expected to remain with a DFL governor. Despite being a swing state in the 2020 presidential election, Democratic Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer is likely to win re-election if she runs. Whitmer won the 2018 election by 9.5%. Maryland is a unique likely Democratic state because it currently has a Republican governor. Incumbent Governor Larry Hogan was first elected narrowly in an upset 2014 election. He was re-elected in 2018 with an even bigger margin. Hogan may be a Republican, but he is one of a kind because Maryland almost always votes for Democrats by big margins. Just look at the results in the 2020 presidential election. The Republican candidate in this election will probably be one of these Hogan cabinet officials, one of these state legislators, or more likely, one of these lieutenant governors. Boyd Rutherford is the incumbent lieutenant governor, and Michael Steele is a former lieutenant governor. They have both expressed interest in running for governor. The Democratic candidate will probably be either Maryland Comptroller Peter Franchot or former DNC Chairman Tom Perez. Franchot was elected in 2014 and 2018 by larger margins than Hogan in the same years. The final likely Democratic state is Maine. Incumbent Democratic Governor Janet Mills is eligible to run for a second term. Mills won in 2018 by 7.7% against Republican businessman Sean Moody and independent state treasurer Terry Hayes. Mills's predecessor, Paul Lepage, is already running unopposed in the Republican primary and is expected to win the nomination. Lepage was most recently re-elected to the governorship in 2014 with a plurality of the vote. You may have noticed that independent Elliot Cutler ran in this election. Cutler previously worked in the Carter administration and was seen as a spoiler for the Democratic gubernatorial candidates in 2010 and 2014. Since then, Maine has switched to a ranked choice voting system, so spoilers aren't possible. So Mills will probably win re-election. Moving into the Republican likely states, incumbent Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy is eligible to run for re-election. Dunleavy was elected in 2018, defeating former Democratic Senator Mark Begich. Dunleavy succeeded former Independent Governor Bill Walker, who suspended his re-election campaign a few days prior to the election. Walker endorsed Democrat Mark Begich following his campaign suspension. Walker is reportedly considering running in 2022 against Dunleavy. Despite this, Dunleavy will probably win re-election even if Walker runs, but of course something could change. Dunleavy may have a recall election in 2021, but I'll make a video on that if there are enough signatures to recall him. The next likely state is South Carolina. Incumbent Republican Governor Henry McMaster is expected to run for re-election. He won his first term in 2018, defeating State Representative James Smith by 8%. Former U.S. Representative Joe Cunningham, who lost re-election in 2020, has expressed interest in running against McMaster. Regardless of who runs on the Democratic side, McMaster will probably win re-election with a similar margin to 2018. The final likely state is New Hampshire. Incumbent Republican Governor Chris is eligible to run for re-election, but has not announced his campaign yet. Sununu will almost certainly win re-election if he runs again, but some speculate that he might run for U.S. Senate instead. Former Republican Senator Kelly Ayotte is reportedly considering running for governor. This race will become competitive if Sununu doesn't run, but I would say Republicans would still be slightly favored to hold on to it. Now, the lean states. I'm only classifying 3 states as lean, starting with Nevada. Incumbent Governor Steve Sisolak is eligible to run for re-election. He won in 2018, defeating Republican Adam Laxalt by 4%. Former Attorney General Adam Laxalt and U.S. Representative Mark Amodei are reportedly considering running. Other potential candidates include former U.S. Senator Dean Heller and former Lieutenant Governor Mark Hutchinson. Regardless of who Republicans nominate, Sisolak will probably win a somewhat narrow re-election. Moving on to Texas, which a few weeks ago I would have put in the likely column. Incumbent Republican Governor Greg Abbott is running for re-election. He won re-election in 2018 by 13%. Abbott is not expected to win by such a large margin again due to recent disapproval over the recent Texas power outages. Former Democratic Congressman and U.S. Senate candidate Beto O'Rourke has expressed interest in running. Other potential Democratic candidates are former Mayor of San Antonio Julian Castro, former State Senator Wendy Davis, and Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo. Actor Matthew McConaughey is also reportedly considering a bid, but his party affiliation is unknown. This race will almost certainly be closer than it was in 2018, but Abbott is favored going into it. But we could see this race change as the election gets closer. The final lean state is Ohio. Incumbent Republican Governor Mike DeWine is seeking re-election. DeWine was first elected in 2018, defeating former Ohio Treasurer and Attorney General Richard Cordray by 3.7%. DeWine will probably win a somewhat narrow re-election because of recent pushback from other Republicans. Cincinnati Mayor John Cranley has filed paperwork to run in the Democratic primary. Democratic Dayton Mayor Nan Whaley has expressed interest in running. Before moving into the toss-ups, I'd like to address Massachusetts and Vermont. These are 2 typically solid Democrat states with Republican governors, similar to Maryland. The governor of Massachusetts is Charlie Baker, who was most recently re-elected in 2018 by a massive 27-point margin. If Baker runs for re-election, Massachusetts will probably be safe Republican. If Baker doesn't run, it will probably be likely Democrat. The same thing applies for Vermont. Incumbent Republican Governor Phil Scott could run for re-election. Vermont will be safe Republican if he does. He was most recently elected in 2020 by 41%. If he doesn't run, Vermont will probably be likely Democrat. Moving on to the actual toss-up states, starting with Arizona. Republican Governor Doug Ducey is term limited, so he can't run for re-election. Ducey was re-elected in 2018 by 14%. Ducey's exit turns Arizona from likely Republican to toss-up. This result really shows how popular Ducey was, considering in the same year Arizona elected a Democratic senator. U.S. Representative Paul Gosar has expressed interest in running for the Republican nomination. Possible Republican candidates include State Treasurer Kimberly Yee, who was first elected in 2018 by 8.6%. Attorney General Mark Brnovich could also run. He was reelected in 2018 by 3.4%. Representative David Schweikert and former Arizona House Speaker Kirk Adams are also top potential candidates. Former Nogales Mayor Marco Lopez Jr. is already running for the Democratic nomination, but he is not favored to win it. Top potential Democratic candidates are Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, who has expressed interest in running. State House Minority Leader Charlene Fernandez is a potential candidate, and so are these 3 U.S. representatives. The next toss-up state is Kansas. Incumbent Democratic Governor Laura Kelly was elected in 2018 by 5%, defeating Secretary of State Kris Kobach. Former Governor Jeff Collier, who preceded Kelly, is running for the Republican nomination in 2022. Collier was elected lieutenant governor in 2014 on Governor Sam Brownback's ticket, who won by 3.7%. He became governor in early 2018 after Brownback resigned. He ran in the 2018 Republican primary for governor, but narrowly lost to Secretary of State Kris Kobach by only 350 votes. The other notable Republican candidate so far is Derek Schmidt, the Attorney General of Kansas. This will be a difficult re-election for Kelly, no matter who the Republican Party nominates. The next toss-up is Iowa. Incumbent Republican Governor Kim Reynolds was first elected in 2018 by a 2.8% margin. U.S. Representative Cindy Axne and State Auditor Rob Sand have been floated as potential Democratic candidates. Sand was elected auditor in 2018 by 4.5%, the same year that Reynolds was elected. It's also important to know that Sand did 1.7% better than Reynolds on the same election day. This election could very possibly move into the Republican column if Democrats don't nominate someone like Sand that is popular amongst Iowan voters. The next toss-up is Wisconsin. Incumbent Democratic Governor Tony Evers won in 2018 by 1 point, defeating incumbent Republican Governor Scott Walker. Evers will probably run for re-election. Potential Republican candidates include Wisconsin Senate President Chris Kapenga, former White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, and U.S. Representative Sean Duffy. The next toss-up election is Pennsylvania. Incumbent Governor Tom Wolf is term-limited and cannot run for re-election. Wolf is popular, as evidenced by a 17-point margin of victory in 2018. Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro is largely expected to be the Democratic candidate. Shapiro was most recently reelected in 2020 with a 4.5% margin of victory. This is 3.3% better than Biden's win in Pennsylvania in the same election. Potential Republican candidates that have expressed interest in running include former U.S. Representative Lou Bartella, Representative Mike Kelly, State Senator Dan Laughlin, former U.S. Attorney Bill McSwain, U.S. Representative Dan Muser, State Senator Jason Ortite, and former Pennsylvania House Speaker Mike Turzay. Any of those potential candidates will probably be in a close election against Shapiro. The next toss-up state is Florida. Incumbent Republican Governor Ron DeSantis will probably run for re-election. DeSantis was first elected in 2018 by a very narrow 0.4% margin of victory. Potential Democratic candidates that are considering bids include State Senator Randolph Bracey, U.S. Representative Val Demings, State Representative Anna Eskamani, U.S. Representative Charlie Crist, and Florida Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried. I want to focus on Crist and Fried because I think that of the potential Democrats, they have the best chance to win in the general election. Freed was elected Agriculture Commissioner in 2018 by a razor-thin 0.08% margin of victory. She is reportedly considering running in 2022 and would certainly make the race very competitive. Charlie Crist is the former Republican governor of Florida. Crist was elected governor in 2006 as a Republican with a 7% margin of victory. He later switched parties in 2012. He then ran for governor as a Democrat in 2014, challenging incumbent Governor Rick Scott. He narrowly lost by 1%, but I don't think that this result should completely write off Crist, considering 2014 was a small Republican wave year. In the 2016 election, Crist flipped the 13th congressional district, which is a district that is considered relatively competitive. DeSantis will be running a competitive campaign if Democrats nominate Freed, Crist, or somebody else. The final toss-up is Georgia. Incumbent Republican Governor Brian Kemp was elected by 1.4% in 2018. He did this despite accusations of using his office of Secretary of State to suppress Democratic votes in the 2018 election. Former State House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams will probably rematch Kemp in 2022. Abrams is often credited with Joe Biden, Raphael Warnock, and John Ossoff winning in the 2020 election and the subsequent runoffs. Georgia will be one of the most important and competitive gubernatorial elections in 2022, and it's looking like it will be another Kemp versus Abrams. Will Georgia continue its blue trend or shift back to its Republican history? That's certainly not something anyone can answer 2 years away from the election, so stay wary about anyone giving a confident prediction of how the midterms will play out. Thanks for watching this video. Clearly, if you watched this far, you liked it at least a little bit. Hopefully you didn't watch this entire video that you didn't like watching. But unless you did that, make sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this.